Hey, this is Jamie from Stonemeyer Games, and I'm here for yet another book club session of my book, A Crowdfunder Strategy Guide, which I wrote back in 2014. I've been doing live updates to the book, little half-hour updates, to update it for 2022. A lot has happened in the crowdfunding space over the last 8 years, and so I thought I'd talk about that. So today's chapter 8, is Go Small to Win Big. And as usual, feel free to ask questions, to share your stories, your insights, your perspectives as I'm going here. I'll read your comments out loud so everyone can follow along later on YouTube when they see this video later. I'm recording this during Gen Con, so I doubt many people are going to join in today, but we will see. So yeah, this chapter is about... It goes actually pretty deep into various specific strategies of how to run a Kickstarter campaign, and many of which are about being focused and how that can lead to success. So I might go through the chapter. I'll go through the chapter a little bit, but my topics might jump around a little bit as well. So one of the first topics that I had here is funding goal accuracy. Yeah, actually, I used the bullet points on the email I sent out the other day. So one of the first topics is funding goal accuracy. And so funding goal methods, I think, have changed a lot over the years. In the book, I talk about going with the lowest possible funding goal, calculated by, what do I say here? So the amount of money that you actually need to make the thing that you want to make. That's definitely a key factor. Having a little buffer for when costs change, when things go wrong. As we've seen recently, in fact, there are some recent campaigns where, due to the vast increases in freight shipping, these are projects that funded 1 or 2 years ago, and now they're getting closer to the freight shipping process, and they're realizing that they are. One company is actually saying that they're like $1 million short of being able to do that. A buffer typically wouldn't cover something that big, a spread that big. But that is actually a good reminder of why you might want to be almost ready to go into production for your product when you're about to launch on Kickstarter. Because if you are waiting a year or two before you actually ship it, a lot might change in that time. So that's another advantage to being ready to go into production right after you finished your crowdfunding campaign, or very soon after, taking some of that uncertainty out of it. George is joining us today. I was actually just going over some playtest feedback from George, who was very kind to playtest a product for us recently. Matthew says, looking forward to your updating thoughts on this chapter. Chad's here, Jan's here. Thank you all for joining in today for today's book club session. So talking about the funding goal a little bit, how you calculate it, or how I say in the book that you should calculate it, and how that's changed. I would say for the most part, what I say in the book is true, except I think in the book I stressed a little bit the idea of going with a lower than necessary funding goal. Like, not lower than necessary, but in the book I talk about going really calculating so that the funding goal is as achievable as possible. And I still think that's important, but I think more so than back in 2014 when I wrote this. It's important to really, really have an accurate funding goal. Really have it be the money that you need to fund the project. Because one of the ways to really lose backer trust is, and we've seen many examples of this over the last years, not many, but some, of projects successfully funding and even overfunding and then canceling because they didn't actually reach the real amount that they really had wanted to raise. And that, I think, is a huge way to lose backer trust in the long term, which is, you don't want to do that if you can avoid that. So that is my update, I think, to the funding goal strategy. Matthew says, what do you typically recommend as a healthy buffer for the average first-time Kickstarter project? Back when I wrote the book, I might have said a 10% buffer. Now I put it at 20%. So 20%. So if you calculate out all your budgeting, your freight shipping, your fulfillment, your production costs, any sunk costs you want to include in that goal, and the total cost is $100,000. Say that's a big goal, but say it's $100,000. I would add a buffer of $20,000 to that to accommodate for all the uncertainties that can happen between now and when every backer has actually received your product. That would be my recommendation. The next topic I wanted to cover is, let's see, I'll go by the email again. I say reward tier focus, true scarcity, and core and premium pricing. Three different topics here that are kind of wrapped up into one. I cover them in different ways in the book. So I do talk about staying focused in the chapter here, and that I think is still really, really relevant. I'm sure you at some point have gone to a project page, trying to find what you think is the main feature of that page. Like say maybe they're funding a game, but you have to scroll through three different reward levels, three or four different reward levels before you can find the game. And then by that point, you're kind of confused. What are they really funding here? Are they funding the game? Are they funding t-shirts? Are they funding a print and play reward level? What is important to this creator? What is the most important thing that they're trying to fund? That should be, I think, either your first or second reward level. Ideally, the first. There are some times where it needs to be the second one based on what you're actually trying to fund. But I think staying focused in how you structure your reward levels is crucially important. And I think that's just as important now as it was back in the day when I wrote this book. So reward to your focus. True scarcity is another topic for reward levels. So if you have a reward, this is for limited reward. So in crowdfunding projects, you can say, okay, I only have 100 of these that I'm going to make. There are 100 of, I don't know, signed copies that I'm going to make. Signed copies of a game is an actual limited reward because you can decide, I only want to sign 100 copies. I only want to go through the hassle of opening up X number of pallets, X number of cartons, taking off the shrink of X number of games, signing them, putting them back in the cartons, back on the pallets. That is your time and energy. I'm using this as an example, but I'm trying to define the idea between true scarcity, something that is limited in terms of what you can afford in terms of your time or money or resources, or limited based on what you can actually make, versus false scarcity, for which I would not recommend doing a limited reward level. For example, if you are making metal dice, say you're making metal dice. They're big, they're heavy, they're more expensive than the standard dice that you're including in your game, but because you're using a crowdfunding platform, you can make any number of metal dice. That's what you're raising money to do. So if you have if you create false scarcity by saying, okay, I'm only gonna have 20 rewards for metal dice, that is creating false scarcity, and I don't think that is a great way to treat your backers. So I recommend limiting your limited reward levels to things that involve true scarcity, not false scarcity. I have one other topic here, then I'll look over the comments. The other one is core and premium pricing. I've seen less of this over the years. Let's see if I can find this in the chapter. I don't see it right off the bat. It's somewhere in the back, I think, of the chapter. But something I used to see a lot back in the day that I use is that I would have a kind of a retail version of the game and then a deluxe version of the game on the Kickstarter project. One would cost, say, $35. The next one would cost $49, for example. And I really like that. I like that it appealed to both types of people. It showed people that you have a long-term strategy for this game, that you want to get this game in retail, but you also want to reward Kickstarter backers, early adopters. What I've seen over the years is that Kickstarter has become more focused on only the deluxe version. So they see, okay, the creators, I think, are seeing Kickstarter more as an opportunity to make the most beautiful version of the game. And if that does well, then they might also make a retail version of the game. And in some ways, they're trying to convey the idea that if you really want this game, now is the time to get it, because we don't even know if there will be a retail version. There might just be a deluxe version. And I think both are valid. I still like the option of getting the retail version, the cheaper version of the game. Cheaper isn't even the core idea there, but I don't always need to spend. So I guess cheaper is the part of it. As a backer, I don't always need to spend $100 to get the fanciest version of the game that I've never played before. Oftentimes, I'm happy to get the simpler version of the game so I can play it first and see if I actually like it. And so I think it's a little more consumer friendly to go with the two options, to have both the retail, the simple version, and the deluxe version. I think that's a little bit more consumer friendly, but there's a lot of other decision points that go into that, whether or not you want to make two different versions of the game, or if you want to decide up front that you're doing a retail or deluxe version. And honestly, when I think I am in the minority among backers who choose that simpler version. If you go to many project pages that have the two now, you will see 100 backers at the lower price version, and you'll see 2,000 backers at the deluxe version. So I think a lot of people do treat crowdfunding as an opportunity to get the more deluxe version. I don't know. Garrett says, it seems like a lot of projects chase a funded in 10 minutes tag or a 1,000% funded metric for their campaigns as an advertising strategy, so they set the goal lower than necessary. And Garrett, yeah, they do. And I think it's kind of it's an interesting marketing strategy to show how fast you funded or how much you've overfunded. It can certainly show confidence, I think, to a certain extent to backers. Hey, this project is doing really well. You should pay attention to this, and that I think is somewhat valid. I don't know if I'm always hooked as a consumer for that with that type of marketing, but I do talk about this in the chapter a little bit. One of the best ways to attract a backer to your project is for your project to already be funded. And so I don't necessarily think that having a lower funding goal is the way to do that. I think it's more about building awareness and excitement and building that crowd in advance so people show up right away to back your project. And also having an awesome project that people actually want to back. That's a big part of it. But I think it's important to keep that in mind, that when you have a random backer who does not know you and does not know your project and may or may not decide to be excited about it, perhaps even the number one way to intrigue them and to entice them to learn more is for them to see that the project is already fully funded, that there are already a lot of people who are interested in it, and that it will become a real thing. It's a human psychology thing where we want to be part of something that is successful. Even though Kickstarter is also about making something exist in the first place, which is a bit ironic. Chad says, how many reward levels do you feel is the sweet spot? Not too many and not too few. Yeah, that's a good question, Chad. I think it depends on the project to a certain extent. But in 2022, we're talking about right now, I would say 2 or 3 is probably the sweet spot. So a core reward, a premium reward, and if you have something really special and limited, that would be the final reward. That could definitely vary based on what you are trying to offer, what you're trying to build, the different configurations of what you're trying to build. But you can do some of that with add-ons too. But yeah, 2 or 3, keep it simple. I think sometimes 1 is maybe too little, too few. I do see some projects just going with that, just going with just 1 reward, and that sometimes does work out. But I think Kickstarter, one of the great things about Kickstarter and crowdfunding is that it is an opportunity to customize a little bit, to customize to each customer's tastes. And so that is an opportunity to have a few different, this is like the time to have a few different versions of the product, because you can make 3 different versions of the product and not have to do that afterwards. Like, this is the time to make different versions of it and different iterations of it. George has a nice compliment. He says, I always admire the way you talk to your audience and people in general. Thank you, George. I appreciate that. Oh, actually, okay. George has done this before. George is leading me into the next topic. Thank you, George. The next topic is target audience and talking to your audience as if it's one person. Let's start with the second one because that's a little bit easier to tell. I bet you have watched a YouTube video where, in fact, you probably watch many YouTube creators where they address the audience as either, so they'll say something like, they'll start a video by saying, hey guys, or hey everyone, and I recommend against doing that. I think it can be in your instinct to do that because from like my perspective right now, I know multiple people are watching this video. 12 people are watching this video right now. So I know that I'm talking to multiple people, but for each of you, you are not sitting there with 12 other people around you. You are sitting there in front of your computer screen, probably by yourself. Maybe there are other people around, but it's probably just you watching this individually. And so when I talk to the camera, when I talk to the screen, I'm doing it as if I'm talking just to you. That is the goal of talking just to you. And starting off a video with, hey everyone, or hey guys, takes away from that individual focus. So yeah, it's just a little thing, a little twist that if you were talking to the camera on a Kickstarter project, on a video at any time, try to think about how you're talking just to one person, not to a generic giant group of people. I'm just talking to you right now. We're just having a conversation, you and me. That's one little thing. That's an easy thing to do. Target audience. That's a bigger concept. Figuring out who your target audience is. And in the chapter, I talk about staying focused again and realizing that your target audience is not everyone. There's what, 8 billion people in the world right now? Your target audience is not 8 billion people. If you've ever watched Shark Tank, in fact, one of the things that the sharks hate hearing is when someone shows up and says, the market for, I'm making a food product. The market for food is 8 billion people because 8 billion people in the world eat food. They hate hearing that. And that's an extreme example, but it's more like, usually it's something a little bit more niche, like maybe it's a product for kids or for parents of kids. And they talk about how many parents are in the world. And so that's their target audience. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to focus on. Rather, I think it's more effective if you realize that your target audience is actually probably pretty small. It's probably a Venn diagram of a few different things. Like it might be hobby gamers who also love birds. That's the Venn diagram here. And maybe you might appeal to some hobby gamers who don't yet love birds, or who don't care about birds. You also might appeal to some birders who aren't into hobby games. But the real sweet spot is that middle intersection of hobby gamers who are open to nature-themed games, at least. So figuring out what that target audience is and focusing on that and not spreading yourself too thin to go after those exterior audiences. With the example in the book being that when I was marketing for viticulture originally back in 2012, I spread myself a little bit thin where I focused not only on hobby gamers, but also on wine drinkers who were not hobby gamers. And that turned out to not be a good use of my time because it's a lot harder, I think, to convince someone who loves wine that they might also love a winemaking game. It's a lot harder to do that than to convince someone who, or not even convince, but inform someone who loves games that they might enjoy a game with a winemaking theme. So that was something I learned during the viticulture project, and I've learned that about every project ever since. That my focus always starts out with, that Venn diagram always starts out with hobby gamers or gamers of some sort, and then I try to find the other pieces to that puzzle to figure out the sweet spot intersection. Really, they're almost circles within the hobby gamers, and I kind of narrow down that circle within the hobby game group. Michael says, what are your thoughts about those who are using Kickstarter to sell their previous games as add-ons? It's a great question, Michael. Because I think we've seen a lot of that over the years, and let me maybe even focus your question a little bit more on creators who are selling their previous unrelated games. So we have, for example, like the project right now. There's a Moonrakers project that's live, and Moonrakers is selling the expansions for Moonrakers, and they're selling the core game of Moonrakers itself. I think that's great. I think that's a great way of inviting more people into the Moonrakers brand. I think the time, though, if Ivy Studios, for example, wants to sell some of their other games to people, I think the time to do that is in the pledge manager, not on the project itself. And one of the major reasons for doing that is that Ivy Games, or Ivy Studios, probably, I don't know their logistic strategy, but they probably have different quantities of games at different warehouses around the world. And that quantity of inventory will also change over time. That'll change over the next year when they're actually manufacturing and freight shipping the Moonrakers expansions. And so really, I think that the way to go there is to check in with people when you're getting close to shipping via the pledge manager and say, hey, we have these games available in your regional warehouse. If you want to, feel free to add these to your order because you've already paid for shipping. You don't have to pay for more shipping. You can just add them to your order. That, I think, Michael, is the time to do it, not during the campaign. When A, you lose focus, you're distracting from the main thing that you're trying to fund, and B, it can lead to some real logistical difficulties later down the road. If you sell 100 backers in Canada, a product that you only have 20 of in Canada, that can create a big problem later on. Chad actually has a good. So this is something that you've probably heard before. So Chad's imitating YouTube creators. He says, "Hey guys, your boy Chad's here, back with another YouTube video. Remember to subscribe and smash that like button." Yeah, that's talking kind of. It's speaking so generically to your audience instead of acknowledging that the people watching are individuals experiencing you, watching you, interacting with you. The next category is owning your small size. Yeah, this is a little section of the chapter. I call it make your company sound as small as you are. This is another thing about how you talk to people, how you talk about yourself and your company. I think it can be, in fact, I found this to be my instinct at times to talk about Stonemaier Games as we. And for a long time, that wasn't entirely true. Like, yes, there were a lot of people contributing to Stonemaier Games, our ambassadors, our independent contractors, part-time coworkers, my co-founder, Alan. There was a we in it. But there were certain things that I worked on. Like, we don't write blog posts at Stonemaier Games. I write I write most of the blog posts. Joe also composes some of the blog posts whenever we do the summary posts. But usually when I write a blog post, I can say, I wrote a blog post. It's not we wrote a blog post. So I think it's important to take ownership over those what is it, proper nouns, pronouns, whatever it is, the part of speech that is I or we. It's okay to be small, basically. It's okay to be a small creator. It's okay to be a small company of one person. That is okay. Own it. I think that's a great thing about Kickstarter, where backers get excited about supporting the one person who's trying to build something, or if it's bigger than that, the two people that are trying to build something. But I think Kickstarter is not the place to try to make your company seem bigger than it actually is. You can be competent and trustworthy, but also be small. And I think with a smaller size comes a certain amount of shared creative passion, where people are like, okay, I want to support this small creator. I don't need to support this giant company or this company that feels too big or seems too big. Yeah, talk about that a little bit in the chapter as well. Linda says, nice t-shirt. I'm from Southern Illinois. Yeah, this is a climbing gym that I haven't gone to in a while, but there's a climbing gym that's in Illinois and in St. Louis. George says, do you miss the early days of Stonemaier Games, like the very first year when it started to grow? The feeling of building? I know that it must be even better now, but back then there were different emotions, feelings. And yeah, George, this ties into what I'm kind of saying about the size of the company. I think when a company is small, there's a certain amount of, you're a little bit more nimble. There's there's a spark to it. You feel like you're building something. Then I still feel like I'm building something at Stonemaier Games, but there's a lot more people involved. There are a lot more eyes on you at a certain point when you're bigger, and for better or for worse. More people know about Stonemaier Games now, but it's I think it's easier to criticize the big guys than the smaller companies. And yet, Stonemaier Games, we still only have 3 total full-time employees. We're still a small company. We just have some very successful products. Yeah, so I do miss it. I definitely do miss it. Trevor says, I've had a big issue with the I versus me versus we, us, so thank you for that. I need to embrace just being one person or more. That's a great way of saying that, Trevor. It's okay to just be a one-person company. I think it's also important to acknowledge those times when other people contribute, of course. But there's, especially on Kickstarter and crowdfunding, or for startups, I think it's okay to show how small you are, but also how competent and how trustworthy you are. Totally forgot my water here. That's why I'm going dry mouth here. The last topic, campaign and project page length. So let's do campaign length first. In the book, I talk about, what do I say here? I say, if you're a first-time project creator, I recommend that you run a 35-day campaign. This is in the book. And then if this isn't your first rodeo, run a 25 to 30-day campaign, because you probably honed your skills and the number of people who are interested. I think I would revise that a little bit. I think a 25, I don't know, I can't. If I was a repeat creator, I wouldn't run a campaign over 3 weeks, for sure. 3 weeks seems like a long time to run a campaign. Yeah, I would probably aim for 18 to 21 days if it wasn't my first campaign. If it was my first campaign, I would really cap it at a month. And probably go a little bit less than that, maybe 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. I think you could even pull off 3 weeks as a first-time creator. Probably stretch it to 4 if you're really finding your footing. But 35 days, that's a 5-week campaign. I think that's a little long at this point. I don't think you really need that much time to figure things out. My first campaign, I think, was 42 days. I went with a 6-week campaign, and I really felt it. You really feel it. There's a lot that you can do in 3 weeks. And plenty that you can do in 4 weeks. So campaign length, I wouldn't go over 4 weeks at this point. In terms of project page length, yeah, this is another one. So this has changed a lot. This is something that has definitely changed, because we now have some platforms, BackerKit and GameFound, that let you as a backer easily skip around on the campaign page. So it's okay now to have a really, really long campaign page where you cover a lot of different stuff, because that sidebar menu that those platforms offer let backers jump to the section that they're interested in. Kickstarter still doesn't allow that. I think they will someday after seeing these other platforms do it. Even then, though, I think I think you should keep in mind that the longer your project page is, the less likely it is for backers to find the information they really need, and the less likely it is for them to even consume all the content on the project page. So I have a blog post called Anatomy of a Great Project Page. I think it is still very relevant. I update that article from time to time to figure out what is actually important for you to have on that project page and what isn't as important. What can you host on your website instead that people can go through and find that? You don't want people having to click around a whole lot, but I think the focus on a project page can really matter, especially if people are scrolling past stuff that they don't need to look at. And this is why I think it's really, really important to test that project page a lot. Get in front of a lot of eyes before you launch the project, so that people can give you feedback about what they're scrolling past. Ask them what they're scrolling past, what they're skimming, instead of really, really reading and consuming, and move that content down or truncate it or even get rid of it altogether. Find out what people are actually using on that project page. Thank you, Matthew. Matthew was very quick with that link. He posted the link right here, Anatomy of a Great Kickstarter Project Page. Let's see. I'll go back to questions here. Philippe says, "Are all those eyes you just mentioned? Do you feel pressure?" Yeah, I feel pressure, but it's more. If Philippe was referring to Summer Games being a little bit bigger of a company at this point, I feel pressure to bring joy to people. That I'm so laser focused on that goal now, on that mission of bringing joy to people, that it's a lot more people to do that for. And so especially for some of the projects that I've worked on recently, like I really want to get them right. I want that for every project, but I don't know, the level of scrutiny is higher, and the number of people whose joy is impacted by what we make is much higher than it once was. So I really want to get it right for those people. George says, "Have you noticed that nowadays the most successful campaigns are very short?" I have noticed that. Yeah, that's why I think it's you do not need a 4 to 5 week campaign to run a successful project, because a lot of people who are interested in it, especially if you're a repeat creator, a lot of people who are excited about it, they know about it before you even launch. Especially if you've done your job, they know that you were launching on X day. They're going to show up on the first day or the first or second day. I think it's still important to have a few weeks in there for people to discover the campaign as it's being talked about, but yeah, I think at a certain point, that's why you see in projects, you see you see a lot of backers at the beginning, and then you do some marketing efforts in between. People see it then a week at the end of week 1, week 2, you see some little bumps then, and then you see a lot of people at the end, people who said that they were going to wait till the end of the project to really dig deep into it. Michael says, "I know Summer Games is not a public company, but I'm amazed that you release sales figures and other financial values like a public company." Yeah, I think that level of transparency is, I don't know if it's actually, I don't know if it's always useful for people, but I also don't think it is that it hurts other creators to know that information. I think it can help maybe other publishers figure out, okay, what is going well for Stonemaier Games and what isn't going well, so that we can learn from that in the way that we're running our company. It's just like one example, but I love that type of information from other companies, and so I figured if I love when other companies do this, why not do it myself? Good. George says, "There are even 12 to 15 day campaigns now, like a sprint, and they're totally successful." Yeah, especially again if you are a first time creator, I think 12 to 15 days can be enough time. I would be tempted to do that if I ever return to crowdfunding, which I have no plans to do, but I would be tempted to run a really short focus campaign. And even actually the pre-order campaigns that I run now, where we're ready to ship right afterwards, they're like 4 days long. And the reveal period about a month before that is usually 10 days long. So in total, that's what, 14 days. That's a 10-day reveal, a 4-day campaign. That's 14 days, and it has worked pretty well for us. You all have had some great comments, great observations, great questions today. We're right at the 30-minute mark, right? Perfectly on time here. So I'm going to end the video. What's this next chapter that we'll be going to next week? So, or not next week, but in probably 2 weeks, we'll go to chapter 9, Build a Better Community. I think we're actually getting near to the end of the book because part of the end of the book is just an appendix. Yeah. So we only have 1 or 2 chapters left. Build a Better Community. Think about that. Read that chapter if you have the book, and we'll talk about that in a few weeks. I'll see you then. Bye.